Hello and welcome to Analytics in Microsoft Excel. Before we begin, we need to understand your tools of trade when it comes to analyzing data in Excel. Data comes from several sources. You can connect data from the web, from files, from folders. If your organization is using a system, a ERP or CRM system, you can also download data into Excel to analyze. So when data comes into Excel, it is always advisable to have it in a table. A table allows you to organize and use what we call structured references, which we'll be going through in subsequent parts of this video. Now, when you organize data in tables, you need to clean, transform, and shape it in a way that will make it easier for you to analyze the data. And the tool you use in Excel for this is Power Query. So Power Query allows you to connect to any data source, shape and transform the data, and you load it. When you load it, all the steps that you've done in cleaning it or you used in cleaning it stays. So when the data updates, your Power Query is able to play it back, sort of. You don't have to do it again. Now, if you have several tables that you have to analyze, you can use another tool called Power Pivot. So Power Pivot allows you to marry several tables, for the want of a better word, so that you can create what we call a data model. So a data model basically brings together related tables based on their rules, okay, so that you are able to call calculations or analysis from all the tables for your reporting. So that is Power Pivot. So when the data modeling is done in Excel, our main tool for analysis or aggregating or summarizing data is the pivot table. Okay, so with your pivot table, you can now add what we call pivot charts, slices, and timelines. So these together would help you visualize any key performance indicator or things that your manager or your user is interested in. Okay, sometimes the pivot table doesn't allow itself to different layouts. So there are occasions where we introduce what we call cube functions. It still maintains the features of a pivot table, but you are able to lay it out in the way you want. So when you have to use cube functions, it comes in to make it flexible for you to lay out the report in any way you want. What you are going to end up with is a dashboard. Look at the dashboard as a one-pager that carries all the key insights you want to report on. Okay, it normally includes charts, visuals, icons to get your message across. It's like you are telling a story, but carried in a one page. So in the end, when you build your dashboard, this process ensures that your report becomes dynamic. So if new data comes in, let's say you now add October's data, all you need to do is refresh and the new information from October gets updated. Okay, so this is rather a simplified approach, but if you are starting off in analytics in Excel, these are the tools that you need to get conversant with. So we'll go through these tools in our case study and then we'll apply them to build a dashboard. So in Excel, data comes usually in this form, either in one big table or in small tables we call lookup tables. Either way, your goal is to go through this data sets and bring out insights. That's all about analytics. Okay, so we need to answer questions like which city is recording our highest sales, which customer has given us more money in the last quarter, which product should we discontinue. Okay, these are insights that you need to analyze this data to bring out. Now in Excel, the basic unit for data entry is a cell. So as I stand here, I'm in a cell. A cell is made up of a column and a row. So where these two intersect is a cell. When you start off entering data in Excel, you start off in a cell, but when you collect a group of cells, you are now handling a range. Okay, now when you enter data in Excel, most likely you started off in a range, which is fine, But for the kind of analytics that we want to do, it is better you keep your data in a table. What is a table? A table in Excel is a table when you see a table. Not a very nice definition, but you realize that when you go into the ribbon under Insert, you see that a table is a distinct object that is used to organize and analyze related data. It makes it easy for us to sort, filter, and format data, and also allows us to do what we call structured referencing. Okay, so in this range, we are going to insert a table. You can come to Insert and then insert a table, or if your table is a complete block like I have here, there are no idle columns or rows in between. Okay, there's no unrelated information around it. Okay, and then I can also clearly know my header and my content. These are some of the things you need to look out for before you insert a table. So standing in any cell, you can press Ctrl T or go to Insert Table as I mentioned earlier. Make sure that the entire range is selected. If you have a header, check the box that you have a header so that it separates the header from the content. Okay, then you click OK. So now when you stand in the data set, you realize that you have this new table menu. In different versions it comes as design. If you step out, it doesn't come, but when you step in, it comes in here. This menu allows you to do some basic calculations or analysis with your table. Now, to make it easier for us to know the type of table we are working in, there can be several. It is important that you name your table. How do you name your table? You come to the table menu. In the leftmost part, you can now replace the default table 1, 2, or 3, okay, with the table name. So this, we call it data. Okay, so now data now becomes the name that references this entire data set. If I step outside the table and I do equal to data, okay, so equal to data, you tap, you realize that the entire data set has been highlighted. Okay, this is one way to reference the entire table. You can also reference a particular field of the table. So you can do equal to data, you tap, and this is highlighted, and then you bring your square bracket. So the square bracket is the key after letter P, and this will now bring down the components of the table, including the header and the fields and other aspects. Okay, so as an example, if I want to call quantity, I'll just type quantity, it pops up in blue, I tab it, and I close my square bracket. So to reference a particular field, I start off with the name of the table, square bracket, the name of the field, close square bracket. Okay, now that is one good feature of a table. The other good feature of a table is that when you add data, either rightwards or downwards, the table expands to include this data, so that if your data updates, it automatically reflects in calculations you've done already. So let's use an example here. Let's calculate revenue. So you realize that when I type revenue, now my table automatically expands. Okay, for this case study, we are calculating revenue without a discount. So revenue is going to be equal to quantity times selling price. Okay, so I have this. Same way, let's do cost. So cost is going to be quantity times unit cost. Okay, and then let's do another example for profit. So this minus that gives us profit. You realize how smooth it is as this new data comes in. They are still reporting to the table name design. They are still reporting to the table name data, which means if you've done any calculation, it automatically picks it up. Okay, now let's look at some basic operations with tables. So as I mentioned earlier, for the fact that you can easily reference a part or a field in the table, like let's say revenue. Okay, now this is highlighted. It means you can wrap any operation or function around this. So as an example, I can sum data revenue in this way. Okay, and I have this. Same way I can do average, data, and then revenue, close square brackets, this way. Okay, you can do the same calculations when you are in any part of the workbook, but it's not every time that you'll be called on to do revenue calculations for everything in the table. Question can be asked, what is the total revenue from Tamale? In this case, you need to use the criteria Tamale to do your calculation. So let's use a very manual approach to help us understand how we'll get this answer. The first thing you do is to locate where Tamale is. So in this case, Tamale is your criteria. It sits in the field city. Okay, so here I select this criteria range, also known as range. Okay, now I locate Tamale, which is my criteria, and filter it out. There are two ways to filter. You can click on the filter icon, stand in here and type Tamale, and then press enter. So this filters Tamale. Okay, if you want to remove the filter, you can press Ctrl+Shift+L, and then you are back where you started. You can use Ctrl+Shift+L to bring back the filter icons. Another way you can filter Tamale is to select any instance of Tamale. Right click. In the right click menu, you see filter, and then you filter out Tamale in this way. Either way, the goal is to be able to see only Tamale transactions. After you've done step 1, locating the criteria range, step 2, filtering out the criteria, the third step is to go to the table design, okay, and activate the total row. So the total row is one temporal row you add when you are doing aggregation or calculations. It comes at the end of your table. The difference is when you step in the total row, you get this drop down that gives you functions to aggregate or calculate. So our third step is to locate where our numbers are going to be summed. So the field that is going to help us sum is revenue. So I'll stand in here and then I'll choose sum. Okay, so this represents the total revenue for Tamale. Now, what we did is a very manual approach to answer this question, but we can use a very simple formula to get this done. Before we do that, let's go through our steps again. The first was to find our range, also known as the criteria's range. The second was to find the criteria, which is Tamale. And then the third was to sum from the sum range. Okay, if you remember these steps, you can always do these calculations with a formula. So to do that, what you need to do is to start with a function called SUMIF. Okay, so SUMIF is the function you use to add up numbers or sum values based on a criteria. So the range is the first step, which is the column or the field where Tamale sits. So before you call any column or field, you need to call the table first. So I'll call data, okay, and then I'll bring my square bracket to pull out the fields in the table. So here I'm looking for city. Okay, you can tab this and then you close it out like this. So what happens is that as I've done, the city has been selected, which was my first step, right? And then I proceed with a comma, satisfying step 1. In step 2, I'm supposed to provide the criteria, which is Tamale. So I'll bring my double quote and type Tamale. It's not case sensitive, but you should spell it correctly. So opening, closing bracket. So opening double quote, closing double quote. Okay, that's step 2. Then you bring your comma, and then the final step is to call the field where we do our calculations, which is revenue. So again, I do data, square brackets, and then revenue. Okay, and then I close this. So step 1, range, criteria range as it is called. Step 2, the criteria, and step 3, where the calculation will come from. So if I do this, I now get the answer that we manually got when we filtered the data set. Of course, apart from SUMIF, there are Also similar functions like average if, count if, max ifs, min ifs. Okay, all these use the same approach. All you need to do is to remember what the criteria range is, where the criteria sits. So that will be data, city. The criteria is tamale, and the sum range is where you'll be doing the operation from. Okay, so in this case, that will be revenue. If you know these three things, you are able to now call calculations easily. So this is the first milestone we want to achieve. Go to the video, practice, and if you have any questions, you can throw them when we meet in class. Thank you.